I'm going to show you how to sew your seam sample. I have the 2 pieces of fabric that we prepped earlier with the right sides together. I'm going to place that under my presser foot. The right side of the fabric that I'm going to make my seam on is going to go along my measurements on my thread plate here. I'm going to align it with the one that says 5/8 on it. That is a common seam allowance. The one next to it on my machine is 1/2 inch and it does not have a measurement mark on it. So I will place the right edge of my fabric right on that line. If your machine doesn't have measurement lines on it, you might need to use a seam gauge and maybe mark your line that you want to sew on with a Sharpie or a piece of tape to keep you nice and straight. I will lower my presser foot. I want to make sure a little bit of my fabric is under the presser foot so I don't get it caught in the feed dogs. And then I have my stitch settings on my simple straight stitch and about a 2.5 inch length, which is our standard. I'm going to start sewing by pressing down on the foot pedal. I'm going to take a few stitches forward and then I'm going to back stitch a few stitches. You want to back stitch to make sure your seam stays in place and doesn't rip apart. So I will hold down my back stitch button and take about 5 stitches back. I'll release the button. You might have a toggle that you toggle to do back stitches. Different machines are different. And then I'm going to continue stitching forward, making sure that that edge of my fabric stays on that 5/8 line. Before I get to a pin, I'm going to remove it. That's why I put my pins with the ball going this direction so they'd be easy to take out as I sew. You don't want to sew over pins. It will break your needles. It could ruin your machine and you don't want that. So I'm continuing stitching along, keeping my fabric nice and lined up along that 5/8 line. I'm starting to get to my next pin that I placed I placed this one parallel to the edge of the fabric with the ball pointing towards me. I'm going to pull that one out so it doesn't get sewn over. I'm going to continue stitching, making sure to keep my fingers out of the way of the needle for safety. I'm going to get not all the way to the edge of the fabric. I'm going to leave just a little, maybe 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch. You don't want to make your needle go off of your fabric because then the edge might get caught under the feed dogs and get all tangled up and weird. So I'm going to stop before I get all the way to across the edge, back stitch again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I have secured both ends of my seam. I'll pull it out and cut the threads with my cutter. Now I have a nicely sewn seam. The front side and the back side of the stitching is nice and even. There's no weird loops. So this part from the seam to the edge of the fabric, that is my seam allowance. Since I lined this line up with the 5/8 inch line on my machine, that means I have a 5/8 inch seam allowance on this seam. If I open it up, this would be the front side that you would see maybe on the side of your shorts or something. It looks nice and straight. If I tug on it, it's not going to pull apart. It's nice and secure. On the back side, I would either press my seam allowance opened flat. This is going to make it lay nice and flat and even smooth that front down more. Or if you're quilting or something, for some other reason, you can press your seam allowance to one side or the other. Again, you always want to press your seams so that they look nice and crispy and good on the right side of the fabric.